ahead and get started with the live stream here. And then I'd like to introduce our ministry and also our speaker as soon as I know. There we go. All right. So I'm Terry Camersell, and I'm here on behalf of Creation Fellowship Santee. We're a group of friends who love to learn about our Creator God and believe that the Bible, when read properly, rules out the possibility of long ages. We met for 10 years at the Creation and Earth History Museum in Santee, California. Then and online, our goal is to equip believers to defend their faith. Since meeting online, we've been joined by over 100 individual speakers, and you can find links for most of their talks by visiting tinyurl.com/CFS archives. That's C like creation, F like fellowship, S like Santee, and the word archives. Tonight, we're happy to welcome back our friend, Dr. Frank Sherwin of Institute for Creation Research, also known as ICR. Frank's areas of specialty are zoology, oceans, Noah's flood, microbiology, and dinosaurs. And we've had him as our guest speaker several times in the past to cover these topics. But Frank is also passionate about cosmology. And tonight, his out of this world talk is called Creation Cosmology 101. With that, Frank, I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Terry, and good evening, everyone. Always a privilege, always an honor to be able to share with you God's living creation here on earth, but also Psalm 19:1 that says that the heavens declare the glory of God. And certainly that is true when we look in the heavens. And as you see on the cover slide there, I have the James Webb Space Telescope. I don't think anybody should be more excited about the James Webb Space Telescope than the creationist, because it is simply unlocking some incredible and sometimes uh, uh, unbelievable pictures of the universe. And so we really do enjoy that. So let's get started. And I knew it. It's not working. There we go. We begin with the history book of the universe, the Bible. All 66 books of the Bible, we believe at ICR, are God breathed. And God was there in the beginning. And he tells us about what he did in the book of beginnings, Genesis. And the most important verse, I think, when we're talking about this issue, which is, of course, Genesis 1:1. When you talk to the cosmologist, he'll tell you that this universe is composed of three parts or three entities: time, space, and matter. So those are the three parts of the universe. And even the most committed atheist would agree with that. Well, I think it's interesting as you look at Genesis 1:1 that says, in the beginning, well, that's time. God created the heavens, that's space, and the earth, matter. So, in the very first verse of the first chapter, the first book of the Bible, we find God, who has always been here, spoke into existence. We call that an ex nihilo creation, the time, space, matter universe. And it's important that we understand we're not living in a multiverse. Those who subscribe to the string theory and multiverse want so desperately to have thousands, even millions of universes out there, and we just happen to be one of many, so they can get out from under the thumb of God. But it's just a universe, the prefix uni meaning one, but in three parts, three in one. So I think that's kind of interesting too, isn't it? But let's move on. And we can see in the book of Nehemiah, and I most of this is covering my what I have here, but you can see that thou, even thou art Lord, thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with their host, the earth, and all things that are therein, the seas, and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all. And the host of heaven worshipeth thee. So we certainly agree with that verse, and that's a good kickoff verse, I think, as we take a look at Creation Cosmology 101. So here's the most fundamental question that the non-believer asks, and of course, yeah, we could ask that same question. and I quote, this is from Hatfield. He said this just 3 short years ago from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. And I quote, why does Earth support life while Venus and Mars, and for all we know, any other planet in the universe, do not? It's one of the most fundamental questions in all of science. Why are we here? And of course, we go to the book of beginnings again, written by one who was there in the beginning, and we understand why we're here. And so this is, I think, a very interesting question that the non-believing segment of society asks. And so this is why we have the ministry of ICR and other creation science ministries. This is why every Christian should know the very basics of astronomy, that is, our place in God's universe. And that's very, very important that we are able to understand that, particularly with this incredible interest in LGMs. I think you know only what LGMs are, little green men, and the idea of space aliens, and there has to be life, teeming life out there in the universe somewhere. And so it's very important, not that we become PhDs in astronomy, but at least we would be able to give an answer to some of the basic questions regarding our place in God's universe. And so let me give you a quick example of that. And when it comes to defending the creation science model, an atheist is somebody who believes in the scientifically strange. They believe that nothing created everything. And I don't think there's any kind of empirical research that can be used to show how everything came from nothing. As a matter of fact, it takes a whole lot of faith to believe that everything came from nothing, and that's really what the atheist believes. Now, I'm not here to denigrate the atheist. That's not the purpose of ICR. What I am doing this evening, just the short time that we have, is to compare and contrast evolutionary naturalism that says ultimately in the beginning nothing versus a biblical creation science model. And that's what we try and do. We try and share with the person in the pew to help them know why they believe what they believe when it comes to this debate on origins. And it begins with Genesis 1:1. So the atheist believes nothing created everything, and that takes a lot of faith. But let's be sure that we understand it takes faith to believe that in the beginning, God. But I would say to you this evening that it is more logical to believe that in the beginning, God. Ours is a more reasonable faith than to say everything came from nothing. And so I share with audiences, especially when I speak to young people, the next generation, learn to ask probing and critical questions. Not a finger in the eye, not in a way of being obtrusive, but just to help individuals to understand that we are asking very valid, probing, critical questions, and especially when that comes to American taxpayer-paid public schools. Let's ask the questions, but let's be very diplomatic and understanding when we do that. Let me give an example. I kind of like this, and it's a way of helping people to understand their worldview. So when we speak with atheists, again, I can't emphasize enough that we want to be diplomatic and loving, just as the Lord Jesus was. So we would ask the question, how do you think the universe originated? What's your best explanation? Now, that's an innocent question. And that's a good question to ask to get the ball rolling when it comes to this very important issue of origins. As a matter of fact, it's the late Henry Morris who founded ICR back in 1971. He said that where you came from is at least as important as to where you're going. And so that's certainly true. So when we share our faith in this very diplomatic way, just ask, and the C stands for the creationist, how do you think the universe originated? What's your best explanation? Well, their answer, the atheist, is the letter A there. They would say the Big Bang. 99% of the time, when you ask this question of an unbeliever, they would say the Big Bang. And we would answer that by saying, well, I didn't ask you how you think matter and energy expanded. I asked you how you think it originated. So let's pause right there because the Big Bang does not explain the origin of the universe. The Big Bang only allegedly attempts to explain the expansion of the universe. And it doesn't do a real good job about that, but I don't want to get into that this evening. But the Big Bang does not explain the origin of the universe, period. And then the atheist would say, well, we don't know. No one really knows. And the creationist would respond somehow, somewhat like this. I didn't ask you if you knew, I asked you for your best explanation. So that really, I think, sets the stage for this discussion about cosmology, creation science 101, if you will, as we share our faith with others in a very diplomatic way. And of course, our ultimate effort is to share with them the Creator, the one who made everything. Uh, Genesis chapter 1, John chapter 1, the Word of God, that is Jesus Christ, who created the heavens and the earth. And he was the one, the creator of the universe, who said in John chapter 3, you must be born again. And so that's what we want to do when we share our faith with others. So let's look briefly at the laws of thermodynamics. All of us here this evening, I think, already know about that. The first law says that the law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. And we understand that. That's a very well known first law of thermodynamics. And the saying is that man can make, but only God can create. And so I use that a lot in my public presentations when sometimes evolutionists say they have created something. Well, I think it's more apropos to say that they have made something. That goes with the creationist as well. Well, the second law of thermodynamics says that the state of energy, the state of entropy, that is disorder of the universe, will always increase over time. So entropy is increasing, that is, disorder is increasing. That's the second law. So these laws are very important in the science of cosmology. And the idea that the universe had a distinct beginning, that is the first law, and is definitely winding down, well, that's the second law, is a serious philosophical concern for the secular cosmologist. That's what keeps them awake at night, I think. Robert Matthews, a physicist out of Ashton University in England, said, and I quote, it is now becoming clear that everything can and probably did come from nothing. Well, that doesn't work. There's no way to empirically verify that, as I said earlier. And you can believe that if you want to, but it's quite a stretch to say that everything can and probably did come from nothing. I mean, you would not be able to go into a 21st century science laboratory, put on a white lab coat, and then adjust the whistles and the bells to show that something had come from nothing. Such an experiment could never be done. By what twisted logic do evolutionists maintain that the very laws that created the universe are now the laws that are destroying the universe? Think about that. Think about these laws that we just looked at, the first and second. This, the laws that created the universe are now the very laws that are destroying the universe. Again, that doesn't make too much sense, and we should be very, very clear about that as we share our faith with others. So that's why Christians need to identify where science leaves off and philosophy begins. And that's the thing that I have tried to teach my four children as they were growing up. And also when I was teaching at Pensacola Christian College, learn to identify where science leaves off. And there you see the laboratory in the picture there. Observable, testable, repeatable science, and philosophy begins. And so it's important that we're able to make a clear distinction between these two areas. For example, the observable universe today, a sphere with a diameter of about 93 billion light years, containing at least 2 trillion galaxies, was crammed into a space less than a centimeter across. Well, again, the secular scientists can say that if they want, but that's not very scientific. There's no possible way to empirically verify that, the size of the universe prior to the so-called Big Bang. And so this is what we're talking about when we want to say where science leaves off and philosophy begins. This is a good example. Psalm 74 says, and I love this, yours is the day, yours also the night, and you have established the heavenly lights and the sun. I love that Psalm 74 when we talk about cosmology, when we talk about our universe. On day 4 of creation, we read in Genesis chapter 1 that he made the stars also. The incredible array of stars that we see just blanketing the skies at night there. Unbelievable number of stars out there. And that's just the ones that we can see. And of course, James Webb Space Telescope has seen a few more since that time that we first, looked up at the sky. He telleth the number of the stars. He calleth all by their names. Psalm 147. So out of these trillions upon trillions of stars, the Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, has named each and every one of those. That is simply mind-boggling. It is incredible. So how can we see distant starlight if the Earth is young? And this is where Steve Hendrickson comes in because he has done a phenomenal article that addresses this. And Steve is the engineer, and it's just, and I'll have a bit more to say about that in a bit. Now, again, my the pictures of who's on this presentation is covering my screen here, so forgive me about that. But it's easy to see how one might conclude that light from distant objects would need billions of years to get here. However, it's not that simple. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, the universe exists in a space-time continuum in which time and space are interwoven. Now, that's enough to let you kind of chew on for a couple of years. I mean, that's just amazing. So differences in motion or gravity can affect the passage of time, and these effects have been empirically demonstrated. And the most recent, of course, is the work done with, I believe, cosmic lensing, they say, using the James Webb Space Telescope. But point number 3 about this is most creationists think Einstein's theory of relativity is the key to solving this puzzle. Relativity theory grants the possibility that under the right conditions, clocks in deep space could run much faster than the ones here on Earth. Now, there's a lot that goes into that, and we don't have time this evening to address it, but this is some of the things that we should keep in mind when it comes to starlight and time. Nobody really understands the nature of light, and nobody understands gravity. But these are two entities that we work with day in and day out. And so if we don't really understand the nature of light or gravity, we can't be too awfully dogmatic about um, the space-time continuum there. There's more work, more research to be done. Now, with that said, Steve has done, as I say, just a phenomenal work, and he calls it Starlight Time. The engineering perspective provides an answer. And so there is the website address there for those of you who are interested. I'll leave this up for a few more seconds, thecreationclub.com. And Steve's just done an outstanding job on that. And you can check that out. Starlight Time, the engineering perspective provides an answer. Thank you for that, Steve. So blue stars, a young universe. I didn't realize just how many blue stars are out there, but they're by far the biggest and brightest stars in our Milky Way galaxy. And it seems that the largest blue stars can last just maybe a million years before running out of fuel. And we've only seen their supernova remnants. And blue stars are also found in every spiral galaxy. So we would say that the short lifespan of blue stars supports the biblical scale of creation, keeping in mind that nobody really knows how stars form. I've read through this a few times, and the evolutionists say, well, you have a cloud of cosmic gas, hydrogen, maybe some trace amounts of helium, and you have some debris. And a nearby supernova can compress that material into the makings of a star. It's very, very theoretical. Nobody's ever seen that happen, even to the extent that when they talk about stellar nurseries, you can't say for 100% certainty that those are stellar nurseries, that stars are being made that form before our very eyes. There's a little bit more to it than that. Not all, even the evolutionary astronomers, I don't think, would agree with that. Nobody's seen a star form, is the point. And if it takes a supernova to compress this material into the nursery of stars, well, what happened to those first stars in the universe? What happened to those stars that would produce those supernovas? You see, it's the chicken egg paradox for the evolutionist on that. But again, when push comes to shove, I think blue stars are evidence for a young universe. How about life on other planets? What about those LGMs, little green men? Well, according to an article written by Laura Gebel, who's an evolutionist, June 10th of 2019, she said alien life could be hiding out on far fewer planets than thought. A new study that dramatically reduces the number of worlds where scientists will have the best luck of finding ET. And so this number will continue, I would predict, to shrink as they realize just what is needed for the Goldilocks conditions, for example, here on planet Earth. I mean, everything is quite literally just right. The tilt of the Earth, the rotation of the Earth, the fact that the moon orbits the Earth at a certain uh, process, certain procedure. The moon, as big as it is, and is distance from the sun, excuse me, distance from the earth, all of this works together to make life livable on the surface of our planet. So that brings us to our created solar system. And we find that there is, they've yet to find a solar system even close to our particular solar system. So they have found some solar systems, but it's nothing like ours. And even the evolutionists, as you'll see in a few seconds, would admit that ours is a very, very special place. Um, a young solar system is seen in the comets. Comets are dirty snowballs of icy dirt balls. They orbit the sun in elliptical orbits. As they come close to the sun, their solar radiation vaporizes and ice producing the iconic tails that you see there. They lose material with every orbit until they disappear. Icy comets in our solar system strongly indicate their recent creation since they can only last for just thousands of years. And so here's another indication that our solar system is not only unique, but it's also a young solar system. And one evolutionist said in space.com 4 years ago, scientists can't directly study how our own solar system formed. Well, I appreciate that candor, that he's upfront and honest, that they can't directly study how our solar system forms. So some of it, much of it, has to be theoretical, and there's nothing wrong with that. In my field of invertebrate zoology, I have to be theoretical regarding the nature and the origin of parasites, and so there's nothing wrong with theoretical science to a certain extent. Sutter said in space.com again in December of 2021, the formation of the solar system is a challenging puzzle for modern astronomy. And certainly that's true because our solar system isn't just a handful of planets that are randomly kicked into the orbit around the sun. It's much, much more sophisticated to that. And it is incredibly detailed and sophisticated. Um, Here's a good example, the planet Neptune, a passing star or a stellar flyby with the potential to pull Neptune out of its orbit, look at this, by just 0.1% could mean catastrophe for the entire solar system. And I hate it when that happens. But look at that, 0.1% could mean catastrophe for the entire solar system. We're not looking at a random formation of the solar system when you have such incredible, uh, detailed orbital velocity that you see here with Neptune. It's it's absolutely mind-boggling to see how these planets are arrayed around the sun and how they interact with each other, maintaining this amazing stability. And so, how did Neptune form these stable orbits in our solar system to begin with? How did Neptune come into the orbit of the sun in just the right manner that we enjoy experiencing, if I can use that word, today? It's takes a lot of faith to believe that time and chance and natural processes would produce something like that we see here. And speaking of Jupiter, excuse me, of Neptune, Saturn and Jupiter have just the right orbital velocities. A French astrophysicist said he discovered that the orbits of Saturn and Jupiter keep the Earth's orbit from becoming chaotic. Without the orbital stability produced by Jupiter and Saturn, the Earth's orbit would make extreme changes, causing instability in our climate and making the Earth uninhabitable. And so I like to ask people in your devotions this morning, did you thank the Lord for Jupiter and Saturn? And don't forget Neptune as well. And so we find that these orbital velocities of these planets is again is mind-boggling. Jupiter is a huge planet, and Jupiter, I believe, was created not only to maintain the orbital velocity and stability of the other planets, since it is so big, but also it's running interference for us. It's pulling away all these comets and asteroids that would otherwise pepper the Earth or come very, very close to doing that. And so we find that Jupiter is very, very efficient. What a surprise in keeping those pesky comets and asteroids away from Earth. That is fascinating itself. And so we don't have this instability that would cause the Earth to be uninhabitable. Um, Here's some fundamental questions. Although the Earth has long been studied in detail, some fundamental questions still have to be answered. One of them concerns the formation of our planet, about whose beginnings researchers are still unclear. They're still unclear about terra firma, right here, the Earth. And if they're still unclear, if they're still unsure about the formation of our planet, which we know the most about, how can they speak with such authority about the other planets, about the other stars and solar systems, about the other stars and other situations that we find out there in space and deep space? If they are not even sure, if they are still unclear about how the Earth got here. So we should keep that in mind. And that goes double, by the way, for the moon. And we'll see that in just a few seconds. Earth is in a safe neighborhood, as one evolutionist said in 2021 on space.com. I love space.com, by the way. Astronomers have searched the entire Milky Way to identify the safest places to live. It turns out we're in a pretty good spot. Well, that's a backhanded way of saying we're it. We have a fantastic place in not only in our solar system, but in the Milky Way. Earth in our solar system is situated in the Milky in one of the arms of the Milky Way, about one half to two-thirds out from the center of the Milky Way, which has a supermassive black hole and is absolutely peppered with stars. And so God, as infinite wisdom, has placed this solar system containing Earth about two-thirds of the way, maybe halfway out from the center of the Milky Way galaxy, so we don't get blasted by cosmic radiation. And also that we would be able to look out at the stars at night because there's a shielding effect there. We can see the stars at night, be able to give glory to God, as a psalmist says in Psalm 19:1, that the heavens declare the glory of God. We'd not be able to do that if we were much closer towards the center of the Milky Way. Well, it's Goldilocks who said everything is just right, and that certainly applies to the habitability zone that Earth has in the solar system we've been discussing. It's not too cold, it's not too hot, it's just right. And so we're in that habitability zone, but that's just the beginning story. We also understand that the moon is very, very critical in this equation of life on Earth. So our moon is simply amazing. And I alluded to that a few minutes ago. Life on Earth would not be possible without the moon, period. Life on Earth would not be possible without the moon. It keeps our planet's axis of rotation stable, which controls seasons and regulates our climate. And this is said just 5 years ago, University of Southern California. In 2005, two atheists, now get this, they're two atheists. They don't have any theological axe to grind. They're atheists. And in this book, they wrote about the moon. And they looked at the moon and looked at it and just came to some shocking conclusions as atheists. As a matter of fact, the name of the book, 2005, is Who Built the Moon? Notice it doesn't say what built the moon. They said the moon is constructed so incredibly sophisticated, so detailed, somebody had to have built it. Now you'd think that they would pack up their tent and become a creationist, but they can't. They're atheists. And so they're stuck in the horns of a dilemma, and I won't go into that anymore, except to say that uh, what the Apostle Paul says in Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, that God's creation is not only seen, but Paul adds an extra word. He says that God's creation is clearly seen, so that even two atheists writing about the moon came to the conclusion that somebody had to build the moon. Romans chapter 1 and verse 20. God's creation is clearly seen. Most people don't realize that they have found insects on the moon. You probably haven't heard about that, but insects have been found on the moon, and scientists are calling them lunatics. So anyway, a group of evolutionists led by Rufu, I think is pronounced his name, in National Geoscience, in 2017 said, and I quote, the moon's origin remains enigmatic. It remains puzzling. They don't know where the moon came from. Once again, without getting redundant, if they don't know where the Earth came from, and you may have read that quote by a leading evolutionist, here we find that the Earth's origin remains enigmatic. They don't know where the moon came from. Well, then what right do they have to lecture us about the origin of anything else in this universe, or let alone this solar system, if they don't know where the two closest bodies that we've been to, and the only other body that we have been to is the moon. That's it. And we have put a bunch of robots on Mars, but that doesn't really count. And they don't know. They simply don't know. And I'm not criticizing anybody for that, except when they extrapolate and say make these pronouncements when they really don't have any right to do that. France said in April in the 2000s in the English Open University, its unusual size and especially Earth-like chemical composition have always been a mystery. And he's talking about the moon. Unusual size, Earth-like chemical composition has always been a mystery, an enigma. And so this is what they're coming to the conclusion recently about the moon. The moon is just perfectly designed in its orbital velocity around the Earth to maintain stability. Now, if the moon was smaller, then of course the tides, and we all understand that tides and the moon go together like politics and corruption. But if the moon were smaller, then you would have small tides. And tides are very, very important for keeping the oceanic waters mixed. and so they would not become stagnant. But if the Earth was smaller, sections, parts of the oceans would become stagnant. Fortunately, that doesn't happen because of the size of the moon and the fact that we have tides twice in a 24-hour period. But not only that, but if the moon were a little bit bigger, then we would have tides that would wash over parts of the continent, one third, one half of the continent. And I hate it when that happens. But the fact that the moon is the size it is gives you this good mixing of the oceans without going overboard, so to speak. So the Earth Moon system's history remains mysterious. It remains mysterious. We have the Earth, we have the moon. Secular astronomers, as much as they want, cannot explain the origin of either one. And by the way, the giant impact hypothesis that supposedly formed the moon conveniently 4.6 billion years ago is in itself some problems, some major problems. And so we see the Earth Moon system is very, very beautifully orchestrated to maintain the quality of life that we have here on Earth. Well, as we draw to a close, I just wanted to share with you a couple of pictures of the James Webb Space Telescope. I mentioned earlier that the one group of people that should be more excited about this research than anyone else would have to be the creationists. James Webb Space Telescope launched on Christmas Day in French Guiana, and I think that's significant. It's the largest and most powerful space telescope to date, and it is amazing engineering marvel. Steve, I think you know more about this than anyone else. Once they launched this space telescope and parked it over 1 million miles out in space at a specific parking area, if I could use that phrase, then they had to unhook, unlatch, and expand portions of the James Webb Space Telescope. It was something like 60 procedures that had to be done. Each procedure had to be working perfectly, or the others would not be able to work. So there was a significant time of nail biting that was done, but it all went flawlessly, of course. And the only flaw would be when the James Webb Space Telescope was hit by a micrometeorite and it damaged one of those gold panels. But the damage was not as significant as they thought, and we're still getting these unbelievable pictures. And speaking of pictures, the James Webb Space Telescope, unlike the Hubble Space Telescope, focuses almost entirely on the infrared spectrum. You can see the diagram there. The infrared, that's an area that we cannot see. God has created our eyes just to pick up the visible light spectrum, which is very, very narrow spectrum of electromagnetic energy. And the infrared is what they were interested in. A lot of dust and gas in space obscures the view to extremely distant portions and the dim light sources, but infrared waves can penetrate through the clouds, giving us these spectacular, spectacular pictures. This is one, and amazing. You know, you just look at this and you have to uh, say, as a psalmist said, Psalm 19:1, the heavens are declaring the glory of God. Just amazing, amazing pictures. The James Webb Space Telescope found massive, mature galaxies inhabiting the universe so soon after the supposed Big Bang, according to current theories, they really shouldn't exist. But the fact is that they do. And a creation astronomer, Dr. Jason Lisle, who got his PhD from that little Bible college in Boulder called the University of Colorado, he did some pioneering that had never been done on the sun. And that's how he got his PhD. And he made a prediction prior to the first pictures of the James Webb Space Telescope being taken. He predicted that they would find not immature galaxies way out there in deep space, but the galaxies that they would find way at the edges, so called, would be mature galaxies. And he made that prediction, make sure that that people knew that. And then the pictures are taken, and he was validated in his prediction, and not the evolutionist. The evolutionist astronomer, using the evolutionary idea of the Big Bang and so forth, predicted that there would be immature galaxies on the edges there, and it was just the opposite. So Jason Lisle was right. The Space Telescope has revealed evidence that challenges the secular origin story and confirms biblical creation. A team of researchers had discovered evidence of a barrel spiral galaxy in the distant universe. But as the commercial said, wait, there's more. There is just an amazing amount of discoveries that have been made. Jason Lisle said, this is further evidence that mature galaxies exist at a distance where the secular view predicted only infant galaxies should exist. And so he was right. He was right. And this is just a very, very fascinating and exciting time of astronomy. Well, the most distant galaxy was the James Webb Space Telescope has seen so far. This is so far; it could change tomorrow. Is the JD's GSZ 14.0. It's a bright and massive galaxy that has surprised astronomers, and that's putting it lightly. Specifically, its age, size, and luminosity added to a growing body of evidence that current theories of early star and galaxy formation are incomplete. Well, that's putting it diplomatically, but many of these astronomers and cosmologists are saying full textbooks are going to have to be rewritten. And they're not exaggerating at all. Textbooks will have to be rewritten, not just sections of a chapter, whole chapters, whole textbooks, because of what's been found. You can see the artist rendition of the Jade's GS galaxy has been found so very far away. And because it's far away does not mean it is old. So we would say at ICR and other creation science organizations that time and distance are two very different measurements. And because something is very far away doesn't mean it's very old. This most distant galaxy ever seen, one that we just talked about, is filled with something called oxygen. Well, oxygen is classified as a metal. I'll get into that, the classification of elements. But it makes no sense to secular astronomers holding to the alleged Big Bang worldview. You shouldn't be finding oxygen with the Jade's GSZ14, and yet they're finding this element, oxygen. What is going on? Well, what is going on indeed? It's more and more questions are being asked and fewer answers. But again, this is exciting. It's exciting to see what God has done. So, seeing oxygen in a galaxy this young is like if you are an anthropologist and you find an enormous ancient city that has evidence of iPhones. That's kind of the situation that many astronomers are seeing. It doesn't make sense, and so we're just on the edge of our seat, waiting to see the next series of pictures and where that's going to take us. And so these are very, very exciting times. It shouts creation, and we're we're on the edge of our seats as we view this. Let me end my presentation this evening by a quote from a famous creation scientist. He has since passed away, unfortunately, but his name was Johannes Kepler, an astronomer. And I love his neck brace there. I'm not sure what it is. And I don't know if he would know what it is either, but he keeps wearing them. He said, and I quote, this then is what I wanted to show about the work of the divine creator. And now it is time that I finally raise my eyes and hands from the sheets full of sentences and proofs upwards to heaven and pray to the Father of light in silent worship and humility. Well, that's all I have for this evening. Terry.
Wow. Yes, I'm here. That's actually quite that was interesting information. So we have a bunch of questions, and so we're going to start though with my favorite one because one of my favorite things about you is your love of puns or dad jokes, as some people would call them. So we're going to go back to the insects that were found on the moon called lunatics. Was that a joke?
Yes, that was a joke, and a very bad one too, but I had to throw that
Well, some of us might have appreciated. So, okay. And Jeff is asking, comets as icy dirt balls? I thought the recent space probe encounter showed they are mostly dust and rock, almost no water or ice.
Oh, definitely comments out there that have eyes, and I want Steve to jump in whenever he has a chance or whenever he wants to, because I'm an invertebrate zoologist. But yeah, you get they're called dirty ice balls, and so it
Yeah.
all depends on the individual comet. But you have all sorts out there.
Steve, if you want to actually let's stop sharing the screen, and then that way we can have
Okay,
a little more.
all right.
Steve, if you would like to turn on your camera and join our conversation, please feel free to. So, if did you want to weigh in any more on that last question? Uh,
No, I'm unfamiliar with the terminology that we have, um, little ice and stuff like that. I was not aware of that.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, they're calling
Okay.
dirty snowballs. Yeah.
Our next question comes from Rob. Rob asks, was there something in the way of another planet or other body that could have interacted with the Earth, that disrupted the Earth enough to produce the flood of Noah's time?
Oh boy, the last time I heard that was back in the early 1980s, and it has to do with something called Roche's limit. But that has not really gained any traction at all. As a matter of fact, I haven't heard about that in years and years. So I would have to say no. I think that what we have here on planet Earth, what the Lord describes in the opening chapters of Genesis about the fountains of the great deep bursting forth, that would provide the volume of water that would be needed, and the tectonic activity would cause floodwaters and all. And so that's a good question, but I don't think we have to go beyond Earth to appeal to the Genesis flood.
That makes sense. Mark is asking, is there any good reason that naturalists believe that that space is expanding and that expanding space can allow an object to travel faster than light?
Yeah, you talk to Einstein, he says nothing go faster than the speed of light. And so that gets into more of a philosophical debate than anything else. But yeah, there's something called a redshift, and I don't know that much about space physics to get, there might be a redshift, there might be an expansion. I think, the analogy the evolutionist gives is you take a balloon, you put some dots on the balloon, and then you blow it up, and those dots get further and further away. That's a crude analogy of explaining the expanding universe idea, and it probably is expanding. It says in Scripture that God stretched the heavens. Me, by remember reading that, and so yeah, I wouldn't die for an expanding universe, but I think it's within the purview of that, and yeah, I'll go along with that. But
It's also part of,
going faster than the speed of light.
yeah.
Go, Steve.
Oh, I say it's also part of the Big Bang theory where they talk about inflation in the first
Yes,
second.
good point. Good point. Inflation. Yeah. And by the way, there's a problem with that for the evolutionists when it comes to inflation. So, yes, thank you for that.
And I'll just throw in a plug because Dr. Lyle, who you mentioned, Jason Lyle, he's developed a new model based on the James Webb Space Telescope that actually involves the redshift and the fact that in his model, which is the Doppler model, the space isn't necessarily expanding. The galaxies are getting further, but the pictures that came back did not show a point where, because of redshift, as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, then they started getting smaller and smaller, which would have been what would have been expected if the Big Bang was correct. But it was actually the opposite. There was no point where they started getting smaller. So we did have him on several months ago to talk about that, and that information is available if people want to read about his new model that's based specifically on that. So
Terry, let me interrupt and say that is fantastic. I appreciate that. You gave a good explanation, and I did not know the latest research that Jason Lyle was
yeah.
doing. So um, kudos to Terry. That's good.
Yeah. So, and he wrote a technical article that's in the Answers Journal, but he also wrote a layman's article that's on his website, Biblical Science Institute. So, little plug there since I edit for him and
Oh,
um,
good. All right.
appreciated that. So, all right. So, back to our questions. Let's see. The next one comes from um, actually, that's not a question. That's not a question. Okay. All right. Well, Jim Welsh says, I think we need to be careful with the terminology, just like in biology. Evolutionary theory is often baked right into the terms that are used. So I'm not entirely sure which term that he was referring to at the time that he posted that comment, but I guess it's a good reminder for all of us.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point, and I salute him for saying that. Terminology is critical. Right definition of words. Supposedly, just before Confucius died centuries ago, they asked him what he would want, and he said the exact definition of words, supposedly. But yeah, that's important. In my field of biology, people conflate Darwinism and evolution, and there's a subtle difference, but a distinct not much a distinct difference between the two. So, yeah, I agree with what he said.
okay. And then we have Dr. Stephen Falling with us tonight, and he asks, can you comment on dark matter and dark energy? Do you think these are real?
Wow. Yeah, yeah, and I'll also ask Steve to put in a plug there. Dark energy and dark matter, the two are separate, and it all depends on so many things, whether dark energy and dark matter is actually there or not. They say a significant portion of the universe must be made up of this cryptic, enigmatic dark matter that nobody's ever seen. You can't measure it statistically; it has to be there, and so it's a big question mark. And you know, I don't know if anybody can say for absolute certainty about the where dark matter is, where it's hiding out, but it seems to be needed to explain the physical makeup of the universe. Steve, do you have anything?
No, I think that it's absolutely necessary for the Big Bang model, but
Yeah,
trusting in the Big Bang model requires a lot of faith
yeah,
on their part, and a lot of people, Halton Arp comes to mind, and several others have said that that's not what is true about these things. There's other ways to get around these things, but if you're doing the Big Bang model, you pretty much need it, and you also need inflation.
yeah. Good point.
Okay, our next question comes from Jim. He says, why do some scientists believe that when the Earth flooded, Mars flooded also? I can't remember any names, but it seems they must think some fundamental change in physics must have happened at that time.
Yeah, now that's a good question. And again, I'm not sure if anybody really knows the answer. We've got these Martian rovers up there, these landers that are, looking through the Martian landscape and are coming up with tempting evidences that there was once running water. And let's keep in mind that no water has ever been seen on Mars. It doesn't have the atmosphere. Mars only has a 1% atmosphere of the Earth, but there's still that 1% atmosphere is enough to make dust devils that is occasionally filmed by the rovers. But the point is this, that liquid water is not able right now to exist on Mars. And so the question is, in a young universe young solar system model, where when did the water on Mars exist in 6 to 8,000 uh, uh, year solar system, and it is a barren wasteland now, as we've seen. And so it could be that there might have been water on Mars during the time of the flood, approximately 4,500 years ago. It's very, very difficult to uh, be dogmatic about that. We are about what's happening here on Earth because the scripture is very, very clear. I think, just as a side note, Terry, just very quickly, it's ironic that the evolutionist will take a close look at the surface of Mars and say a blind man could see it in a minute. There was all sorts of running water on Mars. It's easy to see that, but they're standing on an Earth that's 73% water on the surface, and they're going, I don't see any evidence of a worldwide flood. 73%, the average depth of the ocean is 2.5 miles. There's plenty of water for a worldwide flood, but I have to throw that out because I'll look at Mars with no water and say a flood, or at least a flood of biblical proportions, as they say in National Geographic, but no flood here on Earth. So yeah, I think there was probably water on Mars in the past, and yeah, that's about as far as we can take it, I think.
Um, Steve, did you have any questions that you wanted to bring up?
No, I know that. Thank you for listing my article that I wrote. It was a two-parter, but the main reason I wrote that article was just everybody says, well, if you agree with the assumptions, I just wanted to spell out, look, these are huge assumptions. And when you start using them, they not only apply to the starlight and time issue, they also apply it to radiometric dating and other things where, you guys did the rate project and everything else, which was great. And these are huge assumptions that are made, and we can affect all of these changes. We can change the speed of light in a laboratory, and we can change the speed. We can change some of the radiometric times as well in a laboratory. So if we can do it, why can't God do it? It seems to make sense that he could do it differently. We just don't understand it. What happened during the flood? Did that change how radiometric dating methods did work? Because we see pole changes, we see all sorts of interesting things that we really don't know the implications of.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
And by the way, I've asked you, Ross, the question 3 times, and he's always just pointed me back to his book. But I've asked him, what was the speed of light when God stretched out the heavens? We have so many verses, and he knows them. So what was the speed of light when God stretched out the heavens? And he says he's answered it in his books, but he hasn't answered it in his books. The only answer to that is really, we don't know what the speed of light was. Yeah. And then I asked, what was it infinite? Well, again, we don't know.
Yep.
I certainly know this. I don't see any ancient Jewish sources or anybody like that claiming that the earth and universe are ancient. I see them indicating things along the lines of a 6,000 to 8,000 year creation.
Yeah. Amen.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up our live recording time. So let's start with this. Steve, Frank mentioned that article. Can you please tell people where they can read your article?
Well, I can if I find it real quick on my computer here. Yeah, I think I got it. Here we go. It's thecreationclub.com, author Stephen Hendrickson. Okay. So thecreationclub.com, author Stephen Hendrickson, and some of those are in slashes. But if you just put in Creation Club and Steve Hendrickson, I think the browser would find it.
Perfect. And then Frank, remind everybody about your ministry and how we can find your work.
Yeah, I'm a representative of the science writer for the Institute for Creation Research. We are in the Dallas area, and you can check out our website at icr.org. And so it's very user friendly, that website. You can see our events page. You can see the books and the items that we sell. And of course, I cannot sign off until I share with you the, there you go, that was up on the screen, our Discovery Center. So when you come to the Dallas area, check out our brand new Discovery Center. And we have an Ice Age theater. We have a 120 seat auditorium. We have a planetarium, and you can easily spend a full day viewing it. We also have a section of Noah's Ark, complete with animatronic animals. We have a Grand Canyon section. We have a Mount St. Helens section. It'll keep you busy all day. Now, what I want you visitors to do when you come to ICR, the Discovery Center, once it gets around lunchtime, have them call me. I'll be at the office in the next building over. I can come right over, go out to lunch. I'll pray. You pay.
That's great.
I would do that.
Good, Steve. I'm looking forward to seeing you, buddy.
And once again, we are Creation Fellowship Santee, and you can find a list of our upcoming speakers by visiting tinyurl.com/CF Santee. That's C like creation, F like fellowship. Santee is spelled Santee. While you're there, you can click on the archives page. You can find videos of the 2 times that Steve has spoken for us. And also this makes number 4 for Frank speaking for us. So you can find all of those archives. And join us in 2 weeks on April 17th for the first of our 2-part series on secular humanism. On April 10th, we'll be having Alex Newman talk about the history of humanism in public schools. And then the week after, we'll be having our own Leilani Melendez talk about how secularism is creeping into homeschooling as well. So you won't want to miss those very important talks. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off for tonight.
Thank you to Mark and Linda as well.